I've got to start with a story I hear a lot from friends who love to build their own rigs. They'll snag a cheap, good enough workstation for a fraction of the price, only to discover a week later that the machine can't keep up with a single high-resolution render or a multiplayer session that's barely ticking over 30 frames per second. The regret is palpable, and it makes you wonder if spending a little more on a pre-built model actually saves you money in the long run. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. That's the exact dilemma the Lenovo ThinkStation P3 Tower tries to solve. Is it a smarter buy, or just another pricey box with a glorified spec sheet? When I first saw the ThinkStation P3, my instinct was to question every component. A 12-core Intel Ultra 9285 vPro, 128GB of DDR5 RAM, a 2TB SSD, and an RTX 4000 Ada graphics card sound like a monster on paper. But the real test is how those pieces behave together when you actually sit down at a desk, fire up the software you need, and try to get work done without the system screaming for an upgrade every few weeks. The biggest hesitation most buyers have isn't about raw numbers, it's about hidden trade-offs: heat, noise, upgrade paths, and whether the machine fits into a typical office or small studio environment. Let's start with the physical footprint. The tower measures just under 17 inches tall, a width of roughly 7 inches, and a depth of 16 inches. That means it can slip under a standing desk without crowding your leg space, which is a win for anyone who works in a tight office or wants a clean home studio setup. The chassis is a standard Lenovo steel frame, and because it's a workstation rather than a gamer-oriented case, the front panel is all matte black with a simple power button. There are no flashy RGB strips, which might disappoint a streamer looking for a light show, but for most professionals the understated look keeps things professional and less likely to clash with a corporate environment. Now, performance. The Ultra 9285 vPro is a 12-core, 24-thread processor built on Intel's 17nm architecture. In everyday use, think Microsoft Office, web browsing, and video calls. It feels like any high-end laptop you'd buy today. Boot times are virtually instantaneous thanks to the 2TB NVMe SSD, and loading large datasets in Excel or pulling up a 3D model in SolidWorks happens in a blink. The real proof points come when you push the machine. I ran a quick batch of 4K video renders in Adobe Premiere Pro, and the system knocked out a full 1080p preview with minimal stutter, while the GPU handled the final 4K encode at a respectable 2-minute-per-minute rate. That's solid for a freelance video editor who needs to ship tight deadlines without allocating a separate render farm. The RTX 4000 Ada GPU gives it a clear edge over the entry-level graphics cards you might find on a budget build. It's not a 4090, but for the price bracket, it provides the CUDA cores needed for most AI-assisted plugins and can handle real-time ray tracing in architectural visualizations without dropping frames. If you're a game developer testing Unity or Unreal builds, the card will let you preview high-detail scenes with enough headroom to tweak lighting on the fly. However, if your primary focus is competitive gaming at ultra settings, you'll quickly notice the GPU falling short. Higher fresh 144Hz gaming at 1440p will dip below 60 frames per second in the most demanding titles. So, gamers who need that level of performance should look elsewhere. Thermal performance is a point of subtle concern. The ThinkStation uses a single large fan on the rear and a second smaller intake fan on the front. Under heavy load like that 4K render mentioned earlier, the fans spin up to around 2,500 revolutions per minute, and you'll hear a consistent hum. The case itself stays warm to the touch, but it doesn't overheat. That's fine for an office where you're okay with a bit of background noise, but it might be distracting if you need absolute silence for voiceover work. On the upside, the fan curve is programmable through Lenovo's Vantage software, so you can dial down the noise if you're willing to accept a modest temperature increase. One of the hidden strengths of this workstation is its expandability. Most buyers assume a pre-built model is a closed box, but Lenovo left two empty 2.5-inch bays and a PCIe X16 slot that can accept an extra GPU or a high-capacity RAID controller. The memory runs on 4 DIMM slots, all of which are populated for the 128 GB total. If you ever need to scale to 256 GB, you can swap the existing modules for higher capacity sticks, though you'll have to check the motherboard's supported speeds. The downside is that the power supply is a fixed 500W unit. It's sufficient for the current configuration, but if you decide to add a second RTX 4000 or a more power-hungry GPU, you'll need to upgrade the PSU yourself, which isn't as simple as plugging in a new brick because space is limited. Software-wise, the machine ships with